Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod. We have Sean Kelley. He's the best-selling author of The Visitor. He's the CEO of Car Motivators, had a career in automotive, and also was part of the U.S. Army for 6 years in psychological operations. Very interesting background he has. This podcast is presented to you by podpair.com. That's my podcasting company if you want to start or scale a podcast. And this supplement here called Qualia, it's a nootropic for the brain. It helps with a bunch of things. Me personally, it does help with focus and memory, stuff like that. It's the best nootropic in the market right now. Sean, glad to have you on. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Well, Charles, I appreciate you having me on the show, and I am a CEO of the number one people development / coaching practice in the automotive space. So I've got a team of coaches that we work for automotive dealerships and OEMs, manufacturers across the United States. We have clients from California to Maine and down to Florida and Texas. And ultimately, I'm also a father of three kids, 8 to 19 years old, and I've got also happen to be a special operations combat veteran and avid author and writer. So I have a lot to do at any given time. I stay busy. Let's put it that way.
There you go. I'm curious, Sean, what have been your learnings as a CEO vs your ex-career? Let's say you've been running that business for 5 years now. What have you learned as a CEO?
I've learned so many lessons. There's way more than I can squeeze into a 30-minute podcast, but I'll hit you with my biggest and most important ones so that other entrepreneurs and business leaders can learn those same lessons. I'd say the first most important one, Charles, is essentially surrounding yourself with the right people. I think that's absolutely critical. I've made the mistake in the past of hiring someone with different core values than me. And ultimately, that just leads to real massive problems. So I would say that's probably the number one most important lesson is hiring the right people that are the right fit. And you want to hire to do that. You want to do it based off of like their core values. Hire for who they are, not what they've done in the past. Who they are, because, and I'll share a quick story. I've always believed in taking the hard road. Consistency, building a wall one brick at a time. And this person who was a really good salesperson is reaching out to me, and he's like, I used to have a multi-million-dollar, and this is early in my company, but he's like, I used to have this multi-million-dollar mortgage operation. I can help you, I can double your income overnight, man. He sold me on a get rich quick scheme, basically. And I bought into it. And so I went against my core values. And here we are, we're 10 months in, and he was just draining the life out of me every day, just complaining about how we haven't figured it out yet, and why haven't we figured it out yet, and we should be ahead of this. And I'm like, man, we have landed $300,000 a year worth of revenue since you started, and how much of it came from you? And he's like, none. And I'm like, all you do is complain. And I was like, this is not a good fit. And we parted ways. And I will tell you, since then, I've only brought in people that have that same belief. And now our company's grown exponentially, and life is much better. So only hire people that that have the same values as you do. It's a game changer. And then I'd say lesson number 2 is, sorry, Charles.
And what have you learned from your time in the Army?
So as a special operations sergeant who spent 2 years in combat zone deployments, I learned that you can make any situation, no matter how dire or miserable, positive, fun, and a learning experience.
Right. And psychological operation, what does that mean?
So in the military, right, you go into, a lot of times you get deployed, you go into a foreign country, and the perception of that, your entity, right, your unit, your country affects how successful your combat operations are. So psychological operations, the job role is essentially to win over the hearts and minds of the population in that country, to show them why you're there, the positive reasons you're there, and that way you can have them support your objectives. So psychological operations is really I would say almost a liaison between the occupying force, the U.S. Army in this case, where I worked, and the country, the population of the country. And you try to bridge that gap by by showing them how much you care about them. It's everything from going around and meeting the people in the population. In Bosnia, for instance, we did there was I think there was like 100 to 150 landmines hidden per square mile, which is very dangerous for kids and locals who would like to go into the woods or the wilderness or farm and things like that. So to help the country and show the population we cared, we did what we called landmine awareness workshops. We would actually go to schools and give classes to the schools to teach the children what to look out for, areas not to go, and things to do to keep themselves safe from landmines. Because the United States, it's really, and I felt like I was doing a good deed, right? Because I think it's easy for an occupying force going into a foreign country to be viewed as conquerors and they're here to kill everyone. So we have to show them that we're not. And another thing PSYOP does is psychological operations. We would kind of prevent fighting from happening. So we would actually, we had loudspeakers and we might try to broadcast surrender appeals to the enemies prior to a battle. So we were able to get over, in Iraq, for instance, we were able to get over 200 enemies to surrender instead of fight, which saved countless lives. So, it really is it was a fulfilling and rewarding job that I got to do in the military.
Wow. Quite fascinating that is. Now, you went from me to our sales manager, I believe. What happened during your time there before you actually got to your company, and what led you to start that company of yours?
Yeah, this is an interesting story, Charles. And it's like this is a good opportunity for me to kind of break the mold on a traditional CEO a little bit. But I was in the Army, and I got out of the Army and I started off great as a civilian. I bought a house that I couldn't afford on what they called an ARM loan, which is adjustable rate mortgage, right? So I saved up probably $40,000 at the time I couldn't spend money when I was in these foreign countries. So I saved up this money, put it all down on this ARM loan on a house payment that doubles 6 months in. And then I knocked up my fiance, oops, and then I wrecked my car on the way to work. And so here I am, dare I say, but I finished high school, but I was working and I joined the Army. I was working my way through college, but I couldn't keep up with my bills. My fiance's engagement ring was literally out for repo. And I went to a car dealership to buy myself a new car. And it was amazing. The finance manager tells me, he looks at me, he's like, "You should sell cars." And I was like, "Sell cars?" I was like, "What do you make?" And he's like, "Well, in a good month, you'll make $10,000. And on a bad month, you'll make 3." And I was like, "Man, I was getting paid $3,000 to get shot at in Iraq." And I was like, "And if I work here, I get to go home at night. Like, this is awesome. Where do I sign up?" So I started selling cars and I worked my way up at the dealership. And I became one of the top salespeople it was a 9-store group. We had about 100 salespeople, and I became the second top salesperson in the whole group. There's one guy I couldn't hardly ever beat. But literally my leadership skills from the Army kind of helped me move up. I became a sales manager eventually, ended up getting my own dealership under the umbrella of my dealer group. And I knew that I knew we could sell even more cars. And also I hated employee turnover. We had our core group of employees that stuck with us, but like we had this 20% churn, and it really bothered me. I'm like, how come? I kept asking myself, how come I could keep soldiers alive in combat, but I can't keep car salespeople and service advisors, gainfully employed at my dealership? And it bothered me. And then also I wanted to be. At heart, I've always been an entrepreneur. I wanted to become part owner, and but that's hard to do, right? Anyways, so one day I was giving a sales meeting where I always led my people like I learned to in the Army. I outrank you, so I'm going to tell you what to do and you better do it. Although I was positive and respectful to my people, right? But I didn't know what coaching was until one day the owner of my company sat in on one of my sales meetings and he says to me, "Hey man, you should learn about coaching." And I was like, "What's that? Is that when you like yell at everyone instead of one person?" I don't know what the hell coaching even is. But he hires me, so I started reading about coaching. And it blew my mind. It was like this whole new way of communicating and leading people. And I'd always been learned to lead through blind obedience, right? And this was a whole different approach. And then I started trying to coach my people, but like I was doing horrible because just like you can't read a book on how to fly a Boeing 737 jet and then all of a sudden you can just go do it. Someone's got to like show you the way, right? So that's when I realized I've never been coached before. So I hired myself a coach who taught me to coach. And then I built what I call a coaching culture in my dealership. And that led to us actually, we started setting regional records. Within 12 months, turnover was completely eliminated. One of my employees came to me and said, will you marry me and my fiance on the showroom floor? So I became an ordained minister. I got to marry one of my employees and his wife. One of my kids made me their kid's godfather. And the owner came to me and offered me part ownership that same week. And then I had this nightmare, Charles. It was like God telling me, you are not here to run a dealership and own a dealership. And that's when it hit me, like I am supposed to be on this earth to bring coaching to the car business because I want to give back to the car business because it's given me so much. So I started, I was like, okay, I'm running a dealership. I'm making about $250,000 a year doing this. But my wife's a stay-at-home mom. I've got 3 kids. I was like, how do I go from, because the average coach in America makes about 28,000 a year. So I'm like, how do I go from, and I got plenty of bills and at the time, I'm like, how do I go from being running a store to replacing my income as a coach? So I had proven I could coach my employees, and I'm like, but maybe it just works because they work for me, right? They have to, coach with me, and I'm like, can I coach people that don't work for me, and can I coach industries, maybe even businesses that aren't car dealerships? And my theory was that I could, but so what I did was I spent my Tuesday off for about a year, finding large business company projects to replace my income. And it took me about a year, and I started coaching a multi-million-dollar software company. I landed Missouri Department of Corrections with my mentor. I landed Merritt's Global Events, which is a large Fortune 500 company, and YMCA and a bunch of others. And on my Tuesday off, and while running the dealership and setting records and retaining every employee we had. And then literally I was able to replace my income. And I went to the owner of my dealership and I said, hey, I'm quitting. I'm going to go be a coach. And they laughed at me. They're like, you're uneducated. Who's going to hire you? And I was like, well, they already have hired me, number one. And it's true. I am 2 credit hours from getting an associate's degree. I didn't ever finish college. Yet, I am a best-selling author and I run the most successful coaching practice in automotive, if not, more. But which is interesting, right? So how do you do that when you're uneducated? Well, and that's where I kind of break the mold, I think, is because I'm a self-learner. I read 30 books a year, and I learn from everyone in any situation I can. I don't care how successful or not they are. I think we can learn from everyone. So anyways, as I'm coaching these entities, this software company I'm coaching, and I tell them, hey, I'm ready to leave the dealership. And they're like, well, why are you leaving the car business? I was like, well, I have to. I can't coach other dealerships because I worked at one. They're like, look, sell those other projects to your mentor and then come work with us. We'll make you our chief business development officer. And then you can coach all of our dealerships after that. Just work with us for 1 year full time, help us grow, set us up for success, and then you can coach all of our dealerships. So that's how I launched my coaching practice. And we accomplished that. So I'm a dumb Army guy turned car salesman who got to become a C-suite executive of a multi-million-dollar software company, and now runs my own, awesome coaching practice. And ultimately, it's all because one day the owner of my company said, "You should learn to coach." So it's pretty amazing. And I hadn't read a book for 10 years at that point, Charlie. So pretty crazy, isn't it? Oh, can't, Charlie, Charles, I can't hear you. Sorry. I have no audio.
Test 1, 2, 3. Thanks for that. um, yeah, dumb is probably not the right term here because you read a lot. You have this inner nerd in you, and you like studying. I guess most folks in the army they do have that desire to study and pass tests.
I
Yeah,
like it.
and you do have this discipline of yours plus this psychology background, right? And you know how to wage a good war, I guess. So you have all these attributes playing for you. That's what I can see at least. You mentioned 30K a year, and yeah, nowadays must be at least like 50 or 40, like post-COVID adjusted numbers. But yeah,
Right.
it's still very low. Not enough to maintain yourself. Most coaches are in the industry sort of to fix themselves while making a bucks, I feel. Would you qualify or quantify your coaching business nowadays as at least 300, 500K a year?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're grossing over 2 mil. Yeah, we could very easily break 3 this year. We're blessed because the coaches that I hire. This is a little, I guess you could say, breaks traditional wisdom, but a lot of businesses out there, they've been brainwashed to like, cut, keep expenses low at all times, hire the lowest possible paid employees you can to keep your, salary expenses low. I don't call our salary expenses. I call them people investments. And why wouldn't I want, if I have a company that I want to succeed and thrive, why wouldn't I want the best possible people, the most successful and qualified people engaging with our clients? So I only hire the most qualified and best people. And I pay them a ton of money and I give them the best benefits right out of the gate. Day one, you get 4 weeks paid vacation. It's that simple. Day one, you get 401k matching, full health benefits. Why? I want the best people, and I only am hiring the best people. And as a result, my clients get the best experience. My quality of life is awesome because I'm not constantly cleaning up after preschoolers or people that don't really know what they're doing or care. And ultimately, as a result, my company keeps growing and thriving and getting, phenomenal marks across the board. So and we make massive impact. Like we're only hiring director level plus employees and then having them focus, and they're only allowed to take on no more than 10 clients, because at the end of the day, like that's another thing. It's called the consultant's curse. Right? You work with a lot of different types of people and do podcasts with lots of people. So it's like when you get too busy to make more money, and then also you get too busy to really provide the same client experience, and then you stop adding value, and then you start losing clients, and then you're trying to rebuild. So we do the exact opposite of those things. We actually, everyone can only have 10 clients. They get, I actually, it's funny, the first 3 months with us, I'm already like, do you have your first week vacation scheduled yet? And like I'm holding them accountable to like enjoying their life too outside of work. And literally, like one of my coaches the other day called me up and he was like, "Hey, I just got a $280,000 job offer and I turned it down." I was like, "Awesome. What made you turn it down?" And he's like, because number one, I care about you because you care so much about me. I wouldn't want to leave you high and dry. Number two, he's like, I don't think anywhere I would work would be this good of conditions. I love it here that much. So that's kind of some unconventional wisdom to share with your listeners there.
Wow, man. Yeah, lots in here. And tell me about that software business of yours. How did that happen?
Well, I didn't own the software business, right? I just became their chief business development officer. But literally, this is a cool story for sure. The CEO, so we had just, let me circle back. This was while I was working at the dealership, right? We adopted this new CRM. We were like probably the second dealership in the world. No, we were factually the second dealership in the world to buy their software. So it was in its startup. They were a startup. They were very rough around the edges, and it needed a lot of development still. One day, the CEO so I'd learned to coach, and it's funny because at this time, and this is a gift from God. I'm sitting there pondering, like, who am I going to coach? Who can I coach that doesn't work for me at the dealership? And as I'm pondering that in my head, literally the CEO of that software company, so it's called Drive Centric CRM. He walks into my dealership and he was all stressed out and frustrated. I said, "Hey man, what's going on? I can tell something's wrong." He goes, "I don't want to trouble you with my problems." I was like, "Hey man, let's talk about it." I go, I would love to, I'd be honored to try to coach you through it." He's like, "What's coaching?" I go, "Don't worry about it. Let's just talk about it." So we ended up having a conversation, and it was a really awesome conversation. I would just say he was focusing on serving the check writer. He was like, "We got to serve the dealer, the guy who owns or gal who owns the business and writes the check, right, to buy our software." And I'm like, and he's like, "But dealers keep canceling, and I don't know why, because we do so much for the check writer." And I'm like, "Well, for what reasons are they canceling?" And he's like, the software glitches. He's talking about the different, we're not done developing it yet, and this and that. And I'm like, "Well, who do you actually serve then?" And he's like, "The dealer." And I was like, "No," I go, "Think about this. Who do you serve?" And he's like, "I don't know. Please tell me." I was like, "I'm not going to tell you. You can think, you're smart. I don't want to rob you of that ability. Who do you serve?" And he's like, "Okay, hold on." He's like, "I serve everyone that works for the dealer." And I was like, "Because how much are the dealers using the software?" He goes, "You're right. They're not." I was like, "So what good is your software if all the users are pissed off?" And he's like, "Oh my God, I got to change the way I'm serving our customers." He goes, "Man, I got a lot to think about." Anyway, he calls me 2 weeks later and he's like, "Sean, I've completely changed the way we're supporting our dealers because of this conversation." And he told me, he added a feature called Intercom into their platform, which allows for, live real time, I guess, customer service. And he hired a customer service team to facilitate that, to serve the users. And so he calls me up. He's like, Sean, that was one of the best business conversations I've had. I've completely pivoted the way we serve these dealers. And he's like, could we have more convos like that? And I go, yeah, actually, I was pondering how I was going to sell coaching to you and your software company. So he's like, what's coaching? And I was like, that's what we did 2 weeks ago. So most leaders don't know what coaching actually is. And it's so sad. That's why, and by the way, Charles, shameless plug, that's why I wrote Learn to Coach, Learn to Lead, because leaders have got to learn the leadership language of coaching. It's literally learn to coach, learn to lead, how company managers can transform into leaders who coach, driving personal, team, sales, and business growth. It works. So upon working with this software company for, like I said, about 6 months to a year on my Tuesday off and coaching them, we had doubled the revenue twice through our coaching services. And then that's what earned me the right to become their chief business development officer.
Very cool story. And where can people find out more about you, Sean?
Thank you so much. They can find out more on my website. You can go to carmotivators.com is a good place, or you can go to, I think it's, I do have a personal like bio site, but I don't pay any mind to it. I think it's like seankelley.biz is what it is. I could be wrong on that, but best place would be carmotivators.com. There's a link to, my books on Amazon for sale and everything like that. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. Actually, LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me. Search up Sean, Sean Kelley. I pretty much use LinkedIn as like all updates and things like that.